Welcome to Travel Again Presents, the weekly travel roundup covering the headwinds and tailwinds impacting the business of travel. Please welcome our hosts, Mike McCormick and Ed Silver. Hello, Mike. Nice to see you, as always.
Good to see you, Ed.
Welcome to episode 4 of season 2. I can't believe it. We are just chewing through these episodes this season.
Yep.
Podcast is on fire. So we're back again this week while things in Western North Carolina are not back to normal, Mike.
No.
We continue to press on with the business of our podcast and our advisory work. And I am, as you can see, at a different Airbnb this week until we get services turned back on at our home in Asheville.
Right. Well, and again, our continued wishes and support for everybody that's been affected. Continue to ask everyone to donate to the Red Cross if they can, and whatever you can do to help support everyone. It's clearly just the devastation will take a long time, to recover from. But again, every day progress, and hopefully start and begin the long road to recovery.
Yep. What we can do as a family right now, I think what is best for Asheville is for us to stay away so that we're not a burden on the resources there. FEMA's there, there's National Guard's there, everybody's there helping out. But if you can donate to the Red Cross, there's the URL to do so. Please consider doing that. And thank you. Okay, Mike, let's get rolling with episode 4, on to the news. I chose a bunch of airline articles and one surprise for you this week just to keep things spicy, and it goes well with our upcoming guest. Mike, the first article is about Spirit Airlines. Spirit Airlines explores bankruptcy filings. They've been in discussions with bondholders over the terms of a potential bankruptcy filing in the wake of its failed merger with JetBlue Airlines, according to people familiar with the matter, an article from the Wall Street Journal. We talked about this on an episode with Brett Snyder of the Cranky Flyer. Feel free to go, review that episode. But Mike, this happened after that episode. So what do we take away from this?
Well, a few takeaways. I mean, clearly the financial health of Spirit. They have a huge debt load, and the stock price now is plummeted another 40%. It's down to $1.60 something. Not great news for the airline, and one where, again, I go back to the failed merger, when the merger between JetBlue and Spirit was in play, and then essentially now not happening. It really, to me, those situations should be encouraged. We need more competition, but we need healthy competition with enough scale to survive. And here's another situation where, again, it didn't move forward, and it's just kind of frustrating because then we say, well, we need more competition. It's like, yeah, but the environment and the government should be trying to support those combinations. Look at Alaska Hawaiian. That's being viewed very positively. It's like, so why not here? It's just a puzzle to me. And now Spirit's going to be in a tough situation. They're investigating. I mean, it leaked out that they're investigating this or having conversations. It just further hurts the financial position.
Yep.
Again, it's not good for the industry. It just isn't.
I had family members call and say, should I cancel any flights I've got on Spirit, or should I not book on Spirit? And that's what happens when these things leak out.
Sure.
Obviously, if it's Chapter 11, they'll reorganize, and who knows what'll happen. But yeah, it just further impacts them, in terms of their ability to stay viable. That's for sure.
Yep.
Okay, Mike, thanks for that one. Article 2, we have talked a lot about American Airlines, on this podcast. But this article says American rebuilds sales staff, trying to win back agencies and corporates. American Airlines is fighting to regain corporate and travel agency generated market share, has reestablished its global sales division. The carrier will also resume a popular corporate perk on October 10th, and said it has extended an incentive program for NDC-enabled sales through the end of the year. We have talked to former American Airlines sales staff, Mike, on this podcast, and apparently they're no longer former.
Well, yeah, Jim Carter, who was part of season 1 when the the news broke about, Americans' change in direction and a victory for ASTA that was, that really was a big deal for them as well, and for the travel agents in their community. But here's a situation where now talk about, those age-old business books that have been written about the cost of, when you do things, when you lose customers, and then what it takes to win them back. And here's another one of those situations. I mean, they basically wiped out their whole sales staff, and now under new or revised leadership, or have to rehire and bring it all back again. And to your point, Jim Carter was hired back. We saw in this article, he's back as an advisor to the process. Hank Benedetti, who's another key exec there, went on. Now he's in a position with Foxeye. But you look at that and go, oh, what a shame, right? And the costs are tremendous. I mean, again, the cost of rebuilding this whole sales team, the cost of losing customers, having to win them back, work with, they've now been paying a higher commission and kind of extending that back for, while they go through this transition period. That's a tough road, right, to go down. And, cautionary tale of what happens when you lose sight of who your customers are, what the distribution system, in this case, the value that was being brought by your partners. And change is good. We all need to move ahead. New technology needs to be adapted, new ways of retailing. Yes, all of that is important, but it's also the way you do it and how you bring the industry along with you. And time and time again, it's shown in our industry, the best thing you can do is, think in those terms. How do I bring everyone along with me? How do I bring customers? How do I bring agencies? How do I get everybody on board? We respond well to that as an industry. The gun to the head, dramatic, the using this all stick, no carrot, never's played out well.
No. And a previous guest on
Another
the podcast.
example of.
Yeah, the previous guest on our podcast, Mike, said that agencies shouldn't be so quick to return and hug
Yeah.
American Airlines at this stage.
Yep.
Everybody's got to get back to business, but
Yeah.
American seems to be paying the price for what they did here.
Yeah, they certainly are. Yeah, but again, they will, and years from now, you'll look back. They'll have a reconstituted sales team. They'll be back in business. Maybe with but also along the way, things will be changing as we go, and we're going to talk about that with our special guest today too.
All right, Mike. Article 3, twist for you today. Carnival Corporation continues streak of record revenue. The CEO of the world's largest cruise company has gotten creative in describing his company's financial victories. Josh Weinstein told investors in March that the company knocked the cover off the ball with record revenue, booking volumes and a 30% year-over-year increase in new cruisers in Q1. The company was, quote, hitting on all cylinders in Q2, breaking record for revenue, operating income, and booking levels, he said 3 months later. We don't cover the cruise industry much, but I love the baseball reference, kind of. What do you think of this, Mike?
Well, so a couple of things. I mean, across the board, that clearly cruise is back and even stronger than ever. Record bookings, record revenues. Carnival's one of the major groups, obviously, that has a number of brands under their portfolio. Clearly an indicator of the health of the industry. But you talk about an industry that through the pandemic was so hard hit and took much longer to obviously come back because of the cruise, health related issues on how you get a cruise positive, healthy and basically COVID free or COVID safe again, was a harder task than than an airplane or a hotel. So now that they've recovered and the industry's covered, boy, talk about cruisers are back and stronger than ever. In the meantime, also they've been making investments in product, private islands, additional things that are part of their product set that are actually just helping to even increase cruise adoption overall. So here's a part of the industry that is healthy, booming, and certainly the outlook is really, really strong for that industry.
Yep. Great to see. Speaking of baseball references, the Phils took game 2 last night. Mike, our guest has connections to Boston and Chicago. I think we need to figure out what team she roots for when she comes on.
Well, I think that's a requirement for any future guest coming on our podcast. They really have to be adopt the Phillies as their team. I don't see how we go any other way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should start sending Phillies caps out to our guests that they have to wear on the podcast. It might
That could
reduce
be,
the number of guests we can get, but I don't know. Who knows?
maybe.
All right. Speaking of our guest, I have one more article related to her. The FAA ceases increased oversight of United Airlines. The FAA has given United's safety processes an all clear. The federal agency has dispatched extra staffers to United facilities in March to review the carrier's safety procedures, a move that followed a string of original United mishaps. But they seem to be back in the right direction now, Mike.
Yeah, and with our guest today, that's one of the topics we'll certainly cover is, learnings from all of that, right? So great to hear, very positive, tailwind for them and certainly for the industry. Always want, healthy operations. I mean, very fundamental, obviously, to traveling and travel experience. So great to see that happened, return to some normalcy, hopefully there. And, across the board, especially on the Boeing related issues, we need to, hopefully those are, in the rearview mirror. But, again, good for United and glad to see that for sure.
All right, Mike. That is all for the news today. We will be right back with our guest. Thanks to our sponsor, Safe Travel RX, an app that takes the worry off your itinerary, providing travel peace of mind with emergency response components, travel security, and risk management, especially for those traveling internationally. It includes 24/7 global concierge assistance. Landed in the hospital in China, forgot your prescription, wallet stolen. Safe Travel RX is your prescription for better, safer travel. Download it today to discover the power of Safe Travel RX and reach out to them if you have interest in offering this tool to your travelers to provide them with the duty of care you are required to provide. Safe Travel RX, your prescription for better travel. Okay, Mike, now on to our guest.
Hey, one note before we do that on
Yes,
Safe
sir.
Travel RX. An old boss of ours used to always say, control the controllables.
Yes.
That's a perfect example from a user, a product where you control the controllables. You can't control what's happening out there in the world, but you can certainly do some things to prepare yourself before you are out there traveling around the world and do it safely and build some security, and not just for the company you work for, but obviously for your family and friends when in these times. So great product, but I thought I'd just throw that in there. Those are the things that you can do in this environment.
Yep. Thanks for that, Mike. I think that Sam Katsu always said that to us. It was wise business advice. But Mike, I have attempted to use that with my wife every now and then, control the controllables. It doesn't work as well in that environment. So
maybe,
I
maybe
keep that
not
one
maybe not
business.
great for the personal adaptation. Well said.
All right. So on to our guest. Our guest today is Doreen Burse. She is the Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales at United Airlines. Doreen is Senior VP of Worldwide Sales at United Airlines. In this role, she oversees the global sales strategy, enhancing existing business travel programs, and building new partnerships to improve the United for Business customer and partner experience. Prior to joining United, Doreen worked for 30 years in the hospitality industry. Most recently, she led a team who served over 1,300 corporate, association, and meeting agency intermediary partners. Accounts as VP of US and Canada Global Sales at Marriott. Doreen is a well-known figure in the travel industry. Currently, she's on the airline editorial board for Smart Meetings Magazine, the Business Travel News Board, the Allied Leadership Council for the GBTA. She's chairwoman's circle member and board member of USDA, as well as a board member for Choose Chicago. Mike, please join me in welcoming Doreen Burse to the stage.
Hey, Doreen.
Doreen, welcome to the podcast.
It's so great to be here. Listening to you do my bio, it makes me wonder if I ever sleep, right?
Doesn't sound like it. Doesn't
it's a,
sound like it.
it's a great industry to be a part of. And Ed, glad to hear that you're safe. So many people were impacted by the hurricane, and hearts really go out to all of them. United has donated over $125,000 in cash and about 500,000 miles towards relief efforts, with multiple matching donation offerings still out there. And so, just want to acknowledge that, and glad we could still do this today.
Thank you, Doreen. I appreciate the good wishes, and thank you to United and many airline partners who have offered to do matching and donations of miles. This is fantastic for United to do. We really appreciate it.
Well, I'll dig right in. First off, I don't know about you, but when you start looking at your bio and people say, "Oh, you were this many years in the hotel," it's like, really? It doesn't feel that long. I can't be that old. I mean, it's really kind of it's an interesting thing. But you had this, very, successful career in the hotel industry, and then you made the leap over to the airline industry, obviously with your current role. What, big change, certainly, yes, in the travel industry, but a very different business in so many ways. But what'd you find when you landed there? Were there surprises? What was different? Was the same? Do you feel like principles are the same, but do they apply in the airline industry?
Yeah,
how did you make the jump?
As you can imagine, I've been asked this question many times over the
Yep.
last 3 or so years. It was a little bit of surprise to folks that I made the move, but I will tell you, I was having a conversation with Ed earlier that I literally started at Marriott when I was in high school at 16 at the Howard Johnsons on the Massachusetts Turnpike because it was their Travel Plaza division. So long as you didn't leave for more than 90 days, you were able to maintain your tenure. So for those of you doing the mental math, I am not that old yet. But I just was always willing as I get older, I'd say, where's the role? What do you have to do? I could do that. And I moved to 3 cities where I didn't know anyone. But, interestingly, I'd gone through, like many of us, right? I had managed through COVID at Marriott. I had taken my team through that. I had to furlough 50% of my team. Ultimately we job eliminated, I think 30% of those. And, there were a lot of voluntary packages taken and whatnot. And so I kind of pulled everything back together, was covering 4 different divisions, and then United called. And so I was already loyal to United. I was 1K. I used to say I'm 1K the hard way, right? Because I mostly traveled domestic. But we were already talking about United. We were quoting Scott Kirby, and that we knew United was betting on travel coming back. And
Right.
I really love what they stood for. They weren't forced retiring planes. They weren't forced retiring pilots. And I actually had someone on my team deployed on United. So we really understood the airline fairly well. And so I wanted to be a part of that. I thought travel is going to come back, and it may look and act different, but it was a global role, and it was with an airline that myself and my family actually really loved. So, what's interesting is what's the same. So when they hired me, I mean, clearly I wasn't the airline expert, right? But I had decades-long relationship with 70% of the clients, which are the same clients that we call on at United. And this is a relationship business. And what I mean by that is you still have to do great deals, but fundamentally, if you understand what your client's goals are, then you're not really selling, you're offering up solutions. And so to me, that part was very similar. And the transition with another strong sales team was fairly seamless. What surprised me is I didn't expect that the culture would be bad, but I didn't anticipate just how strong it would be. And I mean, I came from a company that, I still adore to this day, and that the culture at United is really those closest to the customer should have the loudest voice. And that doesn't always necessarily mean that sales. It could be the front line, it could be gate agents, but the empowerment of doing the right thing is something that they really live here at United. So that was a pleasant surprise. But the biggest difference to me is the decision-making process. So I always say to folks, if you want to be a political science major, go work for a large lodging brand, because when I left Marriott, they had 8,500 hotels, and you just didn't implement a strategy or an incentive. You had to get the owner advisory council on board and the franchise advisory council on board, and then you went to the regional teams. Doesn't make it wrong, right? I just didn't realize how much of that I did until I got to United, and I kept saying, okay, who else has to sign off on that? And they'd say, you. So my team at United probably disagrees that it's as quick as it is, but we own our assets and we still collaborate across multiple divisions, but it's just a quicker process because again, in the lodging industry, you're a management company and franchisor, you don't own your assets and you have a fiduciary responsibility to the owners and franchisees that are, a critical part of that business.
That's good. Yeah, that makes sense. But I'm curious and what's interesting though is that I also think the airline industry, part of the industry, can learn about maybe marketing and merchandising from some of the other sectors who've had to do that and have done that more, let's say, more effectively. It's kind of that crossroads we're at now with some of the ways that airlines are looking to, really have been making and continue to make big investments in how to sell and merchandise their product, much more in a modern retailing fashion. So it's just interesting. Well, you're at the epicenter clearly of all that feedback, right? Because you're talking to individual customers, you're talking to corporations, you're talking to agencies. I know from you, and I know from your predecessors in that role, which there haven't been many. It's been really consistent over the years at United. But man, all that feedback comes into you. And now sitting here today, what are they saying that they want from United they're not getting, or what they want from the airlines that they're not getting today? What feedback are you getting about what people are asking for?
It's such a great question. What people generally ask for is transparency and relevant updates. Of course, we share that. I chuckle a little bit. The number one thing that people ask for that they wish airlines would do that we haven't is offer free, reliable Wi-Fi, which of course we're addressing with the Starlink announcement.
Oh, Ed, wait, got to interrupt. Ed, start up. Does that make you happy?
It was on my question list. I personally think Starlink is one of the top technologies of the next 3 to 5 years. I've heard such amazing things, notwithstanding the fact that Starlink is deploying, satellite in Asheville. We're talking about the Asheville disaster and disasters, but putting it on planes, just genius. The previous products stunk, to be frank. Many of them just did not work. So, was that something customers were begging for? Like, give me really great internet and that will help differentiate your product?
Yeah, it was definitely high at the top of the list. If you think about it too, our chief customer officer talks about this a lot, where she said, I've been asked and I've been telling folks we've been working on it and, finally been able to announce it, because it's when you have the current systems, the Wi-Fi options on the planes that we have today, which were best in class, right? When we rolled them out and put them on board, if everyone is dialing in or everybody's connected, right, it impacts the level of quality of connection that you have. And so one of the things we're really excited about with Starlink is that is addressed, right? And so there was a lot of testing that was done where, you literally can be FaceTiming with your family and on a Teams call and kind of doing, other things at the same time. And so, what puts us in a unique position is we actually is our United Next order. So we have all of these new aircraft coming on board, and so as they come on board, they'll be retrofitted with the new Starlink product, and we're going to start doing that in the first half of 2025. So there's some FAA certifications that need to take place. We'll probably start with our United Express aircraft first, and then really ramp that up as we're bringing new aircraft on board. And so I think we think it's the least interesting thing, but the thing that we've heard the most about that is not only is it fast and reliable, but it's free. And I still, even with all of those announcements, I still get questions like, will it be free if I'm in in the economy class? Yes, it's free for everyone. And so we're excited for it to get launched, and we are going to be moving forward with that in the first part of 2025. So it's pretty exciting.
Wow. As a technologist, congrats on that and the deal. I think it's something customers have been clamoring for. So well done.
Yeah, really well received so far. But the other question you asked me, what are folks asking for, right? What do they want more of? And obviously, everybody wants us to put dots on the map, right? And so they want more destinations that they can fly to, and so what we try to look at is, okay, where are we serving? What destinations are we serving? And if we don't serve it direct, generally we're probably serving it nonstop. So I think we've got almost 375 destinations. About 2/3 of that is domestic versus international. And so with 4,500 flights a day in 200 countries, you'd think that there wouldn't be a lot of requests, but the fact of the matter is there are a lot of great places that people want to travel to. And so we're lucky we have our Star Alliance network, and so we literally there's very few places you can't get around the world. And so that's what folks are most interested in. And so when you think about the 25 airlines that make up Star Alliance, serving over 50 global hubs and almost 1,300 airports, and I think it's 19,000 daily flights, there aren't very many places that folks can't get, but it's the one thing that I hear the most about. It's give me free, reliable Wi-Fi, and then folks wanting to get to destinations, whether it's for business or for family and those kinds of things, are probably the two top things that we hear about.
So kind of along those lines, a lot of in terms of progress, industry changes, et cetera, kind of two areas come up all the time, right? One is dynamic offers, dynamic pricing, and the dreaded NDC term, right? Let's start there, and then we'll talk about AI a bit too. But with on that front, where's Americans had all the headlines, in terms of their let's say 180 in their approach to the market. It seems to have quieted down a bit now, as everybody, I guess, is more in the modes of just adapting and working through. But where's United today with dynamic pricing, dynamic offers? With do you see this having a big impact? Because, and just my own commentary, look, I don't think the customer's really seen anything yet as a result. There's been a lot of investment, a lot of time spent, a lot of industry angst, but trickling out the bottom is very little in terms of any real benefit or change for the customer. So where do we sit today from your perspective?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is, depending on what you're speaking about, I think terms get used interchangeably, right?
Yeah.
So United has a very clear distribution strategy. NDC is a part of that.
Right.
And, so fundamentally, the thing that doesn't change is we are responsible for doing putting together strong commercial offers that are competitive in the marketplace. And we should be communicating how our clients, whether they are corporate travel buyers, agency partners, tour operators, wholesalers, how they can access content that's available to them. And so it probably makes sense to start with our overriding distribution strategy first. And I think it gets to, because when you talk about dynamic pricing, I think what you're talking about is continuous pricing, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. With my hotel background, dynamic pricing means something else. So I wanted to make sure I understood that. So, fundamentally, at United, the first tenet of our distribution strategy is we're going to make content available where our customer wants to receive it from us. The only exception to that is basic economy, which we've removed from GDS EDIFACT for US and short haul Latin. But basically, wherever folks want to receive content, that content's going to be available. And the only limitation is that channel's ability to consume and display it. So, overall, we fundamentally support omni-channel buying, which is basically making it available in all the channels that are where people want to get it from. The second tenet is around, we are really focused in aligning our economics across the channels, based on the value that they deliver to us and our clients. And so that's just about doing the right deals with the right incentives, with the right components to make sure that it makes sense for us, it makes sense for our partners, and again, our shared clients can obtain their content from whichever channel they want to. It was interesting, I do hear a lot of folks say, they're channel agnostic. By that second tenet, we're not channel agnostic. It's about doing the right deals across the right channels based on, again, that shared value. And the third tenet, which again has remained unchanged, is we're going to continue to invest in technology in ways to go to market. We're going to support modern retailing, which includes NDC, because we see it as where the industry is going. And we have customer advisory boards, so corporate customer advisory boards and travel agency councils made up of thought leaders across multiple segments who are under non-disclosure, where we'll say, this is kind of what our roadmap looks like. Here's what we're thinking. And it's a very iterative process. So if you think about it, my competitor, in Texas took a very specific approach to how they wanted to move forward, right? My competitor in the Southeast is waiting until everything is 100% in place. And we're in the middle somewhere where we're just saying it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to continue to bring the voice of the customer into the airline and make sure that we can make it available. And so I just think when it comes to NDC, what that means is in direct relation to who's asking about it and where they're at on that journey, and maybe the technology or lack thereof that they have implemented to support it. But regardless, we're continuing to invest in that technology, and it's really about making content available where folks want to buy it from us. And so, but as it relates to continuous pricing, when I first joined, I remember speaking about it, and our revenue manager was talking about the fact that we saw a certain percent of sales increase, and the first reaction was, you're charging us higher fares. And what we had to clarify is, no, if you go in between the fare class steps in the GDS, maybe K is 100 and L jumps up to 200. Well, maybe the marketplace is sitting at 150, right? And so continuous pricing is about pricing where the market is. So we're actually selling the fare, when before we didn't even get sold. It went to somebody else who was more appropriately priced in the marketplace. So a lot of the GDSs have caught up. So you have GDS NDC connections, and the advantage to that is now you can see continuous pricing. So continuous pricing, we send it to all the channels. Again, if you're not all of the channels can consume and display it, but we do make it available, and it's about just being priced appropriately, and all the attributes that go with that price still apply, right? So at least that's the way United manages that, and so we just want to be appropriately priced in the marketplace.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, look, I think there is again, conceptually, theoretically, there's a good outcome. I mean, to your point of, taking advantage of, that you're unlocking value for the customer and for United within those, getting away from those, stepped product, price product offerings, right? Making it much more dynamic, customized, et cetera. I think one of the enablers that's coming is the other part of this question is about, you start talking about generative AI and the ability for now on the customer end, not even just the agency being able to distribute it, you offering it, but the customer being really able to do something with it and cull through, a number of now maybe a lot of diverse offers of all different types, and really trying to create something that is, palatable for me as a traveler, something that really adds value. There is a solution there, and I think the combination of those things may spark a lot of change. But again, right now, it still feels like there's not much, not much change for the customer yet. But it's definitely coming, and I think that's the other part of it. Where are you in your progress in terms of use of AI in various forms? I know there's some. I've read about one of your initiatives around just even better information back to customers about flight disruptions, et cetera. Yes. That was welcomed. I mean, boy, talk about taking some of the
good use case.
Good use case, right? But what's on the horizon for United around AI?
Yeah, so our approach, we just put it through the lens of it should be responsible AI. And I'd say the biggest impact, and not just to United, but probably the industry, is going to be around efficiencies, right? We're all doing more with fewer resources. And so that example, we call it every flight has a story. So instead of a person having to, you're in irregular operations because of weather or whatever, trying to figure out what you need to update. That AI can actually, in a much shorter time frame, communicate something that is not only accurate, but it's timely and it's more relevant.
Right.
Most travelers or travel arrangers or others that are involved in the industry will say, the sooner I know, the better I can actually make decisions about, whether this impacts my travel or not. And so we're using it for that reason. We're thinking about it from a communications perspective. So think about training and having that training go out into different markets and different languages, right? So we're just spending a lot of time saying, how do we ensure that it's responsible, right? And that what it does is it frees up our critical, in particular, operations staff to allow them to do what they need to do to take care of the customer while taking these functions that can be managed appropriately and accurately by, AI to go ahead and do so. And so I think we're going to see more of it. And we're putting it through the appropriate protocols because we want to, we want to make sure that it's being used appropriately. But by and large, efficiencies we think is the going to be the number one impact, at least for now.
Right. Well, and again, I think it'll be very interesting to watch in the coming, 12 months or so as we get more rollout of features and capabilities from Apple, from Google, and others, right? And Microsoft. But we were just at actually in a hospitality AI conference, and the Microsoft leader that was on the panel said they moved from spending $10 billion a year in development and capital expenditure to $10 billion a quarter. And you just think of the massive investment that's going in, that's going to change the tools and capabilities on the front end of all this. And, whether there's going to be a return on investment anytime in the near future on all that spend, that's a different issue. But the realities are it really can change. I mean, it could change the whole booking experience, which is exciting though, too. I mean, but a lot to consider, certainly.
I think the use cases where you're using it to intercede and help with direct communications with customers, I think those are the obvious use cases, and it sounds like you're doing a great job with that. I'm still not convinced, Mike, on the booking use cases. I think more to come there, and maybe United Airlines will do something creative on that front. But yeah, well, a lot can be done on the customer interface side, which is great.
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit competitively, I mean, we covered one of the news articles we covered was about Spirit Airlines and their woes. Certainly Southwest and their shareholder challenges and have been well documented. There's a lot going on in that LCC sector. Where does United kind of look at that competitively? Will you see the future of that whole segment? Not in any airline in particular, but it's certainly a sector that is certainly fallen on harder times. And any thoughts about that from an industry perspective?
My CEO is pretty vocal about his perspective on that, and so I think it starts with understanding United is a premium airline, not because it's the latest fad, right? It's really core to who our passengers are, what the passenger demand is, premium business hubs, how we operate, and those kinds of things. And what you're seeing, of course, is given the success of our model, and there's really in the U.S. only 3 airlines that are thriving, and in fact, if you look at the the increase in demand, over the last year, really it's only gone to 2 or 3 airlines, with us being one of them. And so given the success of that model, it's not a surprise that what you're seeing is the low-cost carriers try to copy that model, whether it's new cabins or seating charts or even expanded cabins and those kinds of things. We've been at segmentation and the way we kind of manage our seating and offerings for almost a decade. And attempting to copy that, it's not simple and it doesn't happen overnight. Right. And it's especially going to be a challenge for anyone that does not operate business out of business center hubs, right? So I think that's just a good backdrop to have. And our segment strategy is not only robust, it's complex, and it's it's a complex set of products that is also anchored in delivering excellent customer service. And so the LCC business model, it's built on simplicity, not complexity. So with the business models being so, they're really difficult to make complex without adding a lot of cost.
Yep.
And if, this is coming up starting, I think, next week. Is it next week or this week? You've got all the earnings calls are starting up. I think Thursday starts with Delta Airlines. And so, I think you're going to hear a lot about this, right, overall. But, one of the things that United did, and, is when we offered our basic economy fares, at a competitive rate, we saw and we believe customers will continue to always choose United over a low-cost carrier. And that's given the overall travel experience, the best-in-class product. If you think like all of those things that remove friction from travel, and then add in Mileage Plus, and of course now we're going to have Starlink and free Wi-Fi. I think it's going to be a really difficult road ahead. And so I know a lot of the folks in those airlines, like we're all part of the same airline industry family. So I don't relish it, but I think it's going to be pretty tough. And I think the next quarter and watching those earnings is going to be pretty telling. And so yeah, we'll see, but it's not looking very optimistic.
Well, but United, you've had your own set of issues and crises and things to manage through, as as any airline does. But everything and really so much of it was externally, let's say driven, meaning Boeing, CrowdStrike, et cetera, et cetera. Weather, certainly. You're always battling the next kind of general environmental issue. What did learnings from all of that? I mean, certainly CrowdStrike didn't hit you like it hit Delta. Weather is of course unpredictable and variable and regional and can have or have not an impact. But it's also most of the time it's how do you deal with these issues?
Yes.
What learnings have you had as an airline around handling crises, basically?
Well, airline processes are really built on redundancy. So it's about not only having the right systems, but you have to have systems in place take over should another system be down.
Right.
So, when navigating the CrowdStrike outage, that was not only was it a great display of team effort, but despite the challenges, we were able to minimize the impact to both our customers and resume our normal operations fairly quickly because of that infrastructure, that redundancy that has been, built in. We've learned things over the years, just with weather and those kinds of things. CrowdStrike and that outage actually was a good test of our robust safety, and our continuity plans. And so we had things in place coming out of some of the weather events of the last couple of years, and it really came to fruition. And I think it's a combination of multiple things. But the one thing I learned coming over to the airline industry is that those redundancies and those backup continuity systems directly impacted the way we manage not only CrowdStrike, but I think I would also say weather factors. The thing about the weather factors too is the best card at United that we at United have in our deck is the hub and spoke model. So what that means is we can really section off one or two hubs that are experiencing bad weather without impacting the rest of our operations. And so being able to contain that, contain the impact of a weather event in particular without downline aircraft dependencies is really a competitive advantage. So it's really about having those. It's not everything goes 100% perfect. Take the learnings, make sure it's part of the continuity plan, but those redundancies and that hub and spoke and containing our impact to those areas are really the greatest drivers of us being able to maintain operation and minimize impact, particularly when things are out of our control. So I do have a CrowdStrike story. I love this story. I probably should save it for the end. But it's really about the industry and the resiliency, because when that CrowdStrike situation happened, we were in Atlanta for GBTA, and I had a client. I'm sorry.
I said, "Oh, that's right. I forgot about that timing." Yeah.
Yes, and I had a client tell me they said, I landed on that Monday and it was 2 a.m. and I got to the baggage claim and it was kind of mayhem. Like there were people everywhere, bags were everywhere. But this beautiful thing kind of happened. Like all the people that were in the baggage claim area, what color is your bag? And every time someone found a bag and they held it up, everybody would clap and cheer and they'd pat them on the back and yay, they were so happy. And I just thought, you know what, we've gotten through COVID. And so, yes, there were a lot of impacts because of the CrowdStrike outage, and it affected different airlines differently. But what it didn't impact is the resiliency and the kind of camaraderie of the travel industry. And so I just love that story. To me, it's like a great depiction of who we are and kind of what we stand for.
That's the only positive story I've heard out of CrowdStrike. As a technology executive, I've only heard the horror side. So good to hear there was some positive, and you guys did a good job of being resilient through that. It wasn't easy for any company, to be honest.
No. Well, so our kind of wrap up question for you. This is our season 2 question that we ask everybody is, what's your guilty pleasure when you're on the road? Because clearly working for an airline, you're traveling let's say as much as more than you probably ever were. So what's your guilty pleasure when you're out there?
That is true. I saw this question come across. I knew you were going to ask me. And I literally said to my colleague, Aaron, I said, I am like such a loser because I can't think of anything good. And he says, well, we have Cheez-Its on your rider. So I'm like, it's like the one thing when I'm traveling that is so bad for you, but that salty, cheesy, crunchy snack. So I would say that. And because I am working for an airline, I'm really good about getting on an earlier flight and kind of, my guilty pleasure is leaving when I can and not feeling compelled to stay longer than I need to. But yeah, right. I'm going to go down as the most lame interview you've ever done. Cheez-Its on my rider.
Cheez-Its are the worst for you, but the best snack. I should get stock in Cheez-Its considering how many my kids eat, Mike, and I know your kids are probably eating them too. So.
Oh gosh, yeah. Anyway, so that's my answer, and I thought I could come up with something clever, but that's really my guilty pleasure. So I try to minimize it.
That's a good one. Thank you, Doreen, for being a guest. Mike, thank you for the interview. Doreen Burse is Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales at United Airlines. Thank you, Doreen, for being a guest on the Travel Again podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you.
All right, Mike, we will be right back with headwinds and tailwinds.
Yeah, so just again, want to talk for a few minutes about our product called Travel Again Spotlight. We did our first spotlight with Guy Pan with George Ruckus over the summer. The response has been really strong. We've gotten media coverage off of it, and George has too, certainly. Basically, the product is a 7 to 10 minute interview format. It's basically a shorter format that's really great for social media and just for getting the word out. We focus on your company's either leadership, brand, product, whatever it is, maybe bringing something new to market. You want to talk about your differentiators, what you do, why you're different, what you're bringing to the industry. We produce it. We have Ed and I do it together, and along with the whoever from the company that's a part of the spotlight. But again, if you want to learn more about bringing it and using that as a way, and what we love about it is, anytime we can bring new products, new offerings, fresh ideas to the marketplace, we'd love to do that and take it out to our influencer network. And we've got again, really pleased with what the podcast has done, the audience we're reaching, and the response we're getting. And we feel like, it's a way of kind of, again, adding value and bringing something back. So if you are a company or a leader and you're looking to do something like this, just get in touch with us and we'll put something together and take you out to the marketplace.
All right. Thanks for that, Mike. And now we will wrap with headwinds and tailwinds. We will identify what we think is adding value to the travel industry or taking it away. Mike, I'm up first with headwind, and it's literal winds. Obviously, hurricanes are on my mind. Hurricane Milton is forecast to become Category 5 on track to Florida Gulf Coast. I pulled that from CNN about an hour and a half ago when we were prepping for the podcast. And Mike, it is now already a Category 5 on its way to the Florida Panhandle. We hope that everyone who is in harm's way is thinking about evacuating, which evacuation orders are already been posted. It's an area that got hit by Helene. I saw pictures of houses with all the debris on ready to be picked up by the trash folks. And this is also headed towards Disney and the vacation area. So we wish all of our tourist friends and our families in that area the best through this storm. And good luck whenever these kind of things hit. They hit tourism very hard. Obviously hit people personally. And so good luck out there with Milton coming your way, Mike.
Yeah. Well, and now for a bit of a tailwind. Good news, and again, not directly related to travel, but we've been following this in terms of the dock workers union and the strike that was happened right in the midst of everything with Helene. And I think to the credit of both sides, they've postponed now and suspended till January 15th, giving them more time to negotiate. The sources close to the negotiations have said that basically they've got a wage increase kind of in place that they think tentatively will work for both sides. And now they still have the open issue of use of automation, which is a big deal in terms of future jobs and security around jobs, and looking for ways that automation and various forms of AI can be helpful, maybe assist jobs, but not eliminate jobs. And that's a big point, along the way for a lot of industries. But this issue still needs to be worked on. What I loved about it is that both sides were, let's say, they read the room. They understood this was happening in the midst of this damage. It potentially could have had a huge impact on supply chain, ability to focus on recovery. And I think both sides, stepped up and found a way to basically move things forward, diffuse, get people back to work, make sure that there weren't disruptions, and credit to everybody involved there. I tie that back to the hotel workers again and the striking that continues to expand across the country. And I'm just saying, I really think both sides, but the hotel brands really need to think about what they're doing here. I don't think the right answer is the direction that's been going, which is eliminating services, eliminating jobs, hotel cleaning and support. This is not good for the industry. They've got to find a way to get to a good place. Workers need to be paid competitively. They need to be paid fairly. Yes. And there's ways to do that. Customers are not asking for less services and support in a hotel. They're just not. I mean, this notion that just because during COVID we weren't cleaning your room, now we're never going to clean your room. I mean, those kinds of issues. It's not even good for the hotel property, honestly, because you need to continue to maintain and service and keep your property up. And I just see this as going the wrong direction. I think both sides need to really come to the table and work this out. We don't need this now as an industry on top of all the other things we face. Back to control the controllables. This is a controllable. Step up. Let's find a way. Let's get this resolved and get people back to work and get them the paid, get them the support they need, so that, again, the industry's very successful, very profitable industry. I'm sure they can find a way.
Okay. Well, I hope they do. And congrats to the dock workers for taking this step and delaying things further so we can have conversations. There are unintended consequences from these strikes. Toilet paper disappeared from the shelves overnight, even though toilet paper is not an import. So, they need to be careful with this. And, best of luck to the hotel workers. I hope they can work it out. Like you said, Mike, thank you for that. Mike, that is our show today. Thanks again to our sponsor, Safe Travel RX, and we will see you back again here in 2 weeks at the Travel Again podcast. Thanks, Mike, for a great show.
See you, Ed.